And hell, folks, this is my longtime friend Leigh Steinberg. Leigh, how are you?
Doing peachy.
And without any further ado, I'm going to get right to it because we want to talk about your client list. Congratulates you on a successful
Congratulates you
on
on
a
a
successful
successful. Congratulates you on a successful.
so successful it had to be repeated more than once on a very successful resurgence, and I mean, just has to be said, you're at the top of your game, and I have to candidly say, it's great to see you're at your rightful place. I just want to say that as a friend.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Hey, let's talk about your newest clients for the 2018 NFL Draft to start.
So we signed another good draft class. They're now all at training facilities across the country where they work on the testables that come at the scouting combine. So it's how fast you can run a 40, how high a vertical leap, a horizontal leap, how many times a player can bench press to 220. From McKinney, Texas, who was a star in the Pac-12 at USC, gained 1,550 yards last year. I think he's a real good chance for the first round in the draft. We have another running back, Jeffrey Wilson from North Texas, and he's also very productive. Then we have four quarterbacks, Chase Liddon from Marshall, who's really outstanding, good size, good arm, good character. I think he's going to rise in the draft. Remember last year at this time, I was trying to talk to you about Patrick Mahomes,
Yep.
and everyone assumed he'd be a second or third rounder, and he ended up being the 10th pick in the first round, and now has been given the nod to start next year for Kansas City. So think of it this way, the draft is a projection as to how a player will do over the next 10 to 12 years. It's not a merit badge for great college performance. So all of the scouting is ahead of us except for the all-star games, which have already occurred. So they're all getting ready. We have another quarterback, Riley Ferguson from Memphis, who comes out of the bloodlines of Paxton Lynch. Again, big, strong, mobile, another quarterback who could pop. Then we have Nick Shimonek from Texas Tech, who again is the legacy of Patrick Mahomes. He had a rookie year to perfect his starting skills, but I think people will love what they see for the future. And then Logan Woodside from the University of from Toledo, who had a hyper-productive collegiate career. And they're getting ready because the quarterbacks will all throw at the scouting combine. For someone like Ronald Jones, all that's important is he runs a fast 40 because he's hyper-productive on the field. And so the league has gone completely speed-centric and speed crazy. So someone could run a fast 40 at this combine or then later at pro scouting day. And what would happen is they would meteorically rise up the scouting charts. And whether they were a wide receiver who could catch or not is sort of superfluous, or whether they were a defensive back who could actually guard someone seems beside the point. So we also have the little brother of actually the twin of Aaron Jones, who broke through this year. Remember last year we had these two running backs, Jamal Williams from BYU and Aaron Jones from UTEP.
Yep.
They got drafted in back-to-back rounds by the Green Bay Packers. And the starting running back went down, and now it looks like these two, Thunder and Lightning, are going to be the incumbent backs at the Packers for years to come. So Aaron's got a twin named Alvin who played also at UTEP, and he's a very good linebacker.
Hey, so how would you help me clear up something regarding Paxton Lynch? Because he started out with the Broncos strong, looked promising as the starter, and now some people are criticizing an alleged interest in video games. which I saw. Could you help give us a picture as to what's happening here with this media smearing, as it were? You know, what's going on?
The care and development of young quarterbacks in the NFL is a very complex process. And we've now moved to an era of instant judgment. So quarterback comes in, he really has to deal with the adjustment in terms of reading defenses, the level of separation with the wide receiver, how fast the game moves. And it used to be we would give that young man 3 years before evaluating him. And now, because of social media and hyper focus, in 3 games he's a bust. Paxton Lynch can still be a wonderful starting NFL quarterback. He's just never got the opportunity, and the injuries didn't help either. He had 2 starts his first year. He had 2 starts his second year, and one of them he got injured. And what you need as a young quarterback is the ability to have rhythm, to see a mistake and be able to correct it the next week. He's never had any of that. So frankly, the jury on Paxton Lynch is incomplete. So you need to throw a quarterback the ball and let him go and let him learn on the field. But that hasn't happened yet with him for a variety of reasons. And, you know, it's funny. If you think about it, Jenny, all last year, 2016, Jared Goff went out 7 games for the Rams. He lost all 7. He was considered to be the worst bust in the world. Get rid of him, wasted first-round draft pick, and he comes back and makes the Pro Bowl this year.
Yeah.
And if we had used the same criteria on quarterbacks like John Elway or Peyton Manning, both of whom threw twice the interceptions than they did touchdown passes, we never would have seen their greatness. And Troy Aikman went 1-15 his first game. So Paxton just hasn't had the opportunity yet, and we're very much hoping it's in Denver. But we really don't have any control over what the Broncos do to improve the team. And I expect to be living in Denver. It was very, very painful to go 5-11 after we were so used to Super Bowls and being in the hunt. So I understand the angst, but it's misplaced if it's aimed at Paxton.
Hey, how much of this problem do you think is born of a collective bargaining agreement that, for want of a better term, chokes off the ability of a coach to develop a young quarterback, unlike the past with John Elway, Troy Aikman, and other quarterbacks?
Well, frankly, it's more the pressure to win and win today, and the short leash that fans and writers give to a developing quarterback. The only way to really get better is to be out there on the field. You have to live through some mistakes. Every once in a while, you get a Deshaun Watson who comes right out and is really super. But generally, when you see that happen, like with an RG3 who was dominating the NFL, he fell back. Colin Kaepernick under Harbaugh was a serviceable quarterback, and he fell back. So there's a process here that people need to go through. One thing that has happened, Sandy, is that the position of starting quarterback, a franchise quarterback, has become so critical in a quarterback-centric game that, and I'm talking about someone that you can build a team around for 10 to 12 years, someone who you win because of rather than just with, and someone who, in the most adverse situations, the quarterback's thrown 2 interceptions, the crowd is booing, his center's looking at him like he must be playing on hallucinations. And now what does he do? Can he elevate his level of play in that adversity, compartmentalize, adopt a quiet mind, and then take a team, on his back through the playoffs to the Super Bowl? That's what everybody's looking for. But if you don't give the young quarterback a chance to develop, you may look forever.
Talk about how you would approach the, if you can, the NFL college scouting combine? Because some players choose to skip it in the past. Most, don't. But what's the advantage to, particularly as a quarterback, going to the combine and performing? For those who don't know. Yeah.
The combine has developed into the Super Bowl of scouting events. So a player can still, after the combine, go back to campus and have a pro scouting day. So they can run the same drills all over again, or if they didn't like what they did, they can improve it. And for quarterbacks, it's critical because they have what's called pro scouting day, and they have a throwing session of 40 minutes that can either completely electrify the attendees or can set them back. But the combine has every single general manager, head coach, position coach, scout in football. They're all there in a way they may not be there for the pro scouting day. And so the throwing that a quarterback would do, almost all the quarterbacks throw now. It's limited throw. They throw 3 passes and then go walk around for a while and take a break. It's limited passing. What's critically important is the one-on-one meetings that take place between players and a franchise. So they might walk into a room for 15 minutes, which is filled with a general manager, a team president, a coach, a scout, and they'll be throwing questions at them, testing their maturity, their character, their football knowledge very quickly. And so the key to getting drafted high is having a couple teams fall in love with the player and say, we can specifically visualize him in this role for us. They can take a player off the board wherever they want. It's not helpful when you go through the scouting process for a whole series of teams that said that a player looks like a good prospect, just not for them. To get drafted high, you need a couple teams at least to have a real fervor and desire to have that player.
Hey, so talking about Patrick Mahomes, since the trade of Alex Smith from the Chiefs to the Washington Redskins. By the way, what did you think of that trade? And if you feel comfortable commenting, and what did you think of that trade with respect to your client and his future?
Well, obviously, it accelerated it. I've never been as concerned as to when one of my young quarterbacks starts as I have been with the fact that they're ready. And when they do start, whether it's Carson Palmer or Aaron Rodgers or Phillip Rivers or Brett Favre, all of whom started slowly, in some cases didn't play for 3 years. What I'm really concerned with is once they get the nod, can they now sustain this for 12 to 15 years? So that really is the key. The Chiefs were in a situation where you simply can't deny that Alex Smith has been a winning quarterback and has been an excellent quarterback. But they couldn't get the next step through the playoffs to the Super Bowl. This has happened over and over and over again. And so I think that it's a trade that works out really well for both sides because Alex Smith is a quality starting quarterback. He was really nice to Patrick. He gave him lots of advice. He could have just stonewalled him, more akin to Montana and Steve Young, but he didn't. And so now Patrick gets his chance to start. Andy Reid is there. He's a quarterback whisperer. They run a really lively offense. He's got good tools. So much of this is the situation that a player walks into. So I'm trying to keep the expectations reasonable here because he's still a young starting quarterback, but he can do any freakish things with football.
Yes.
His ability to throw from off balance, from on the run, from the pocket, with just the right touch on it. And you look at the pass and say, where'd that come from? But I think last year at Pro Scouting Day, the very last play he did was he stood at Texas Tech in Lubbock on the 25-yard line and threw it across the 50 into the other end zone and through the end zone. It was like an 85-yard pass that
Jeez.
was accurate. And so he's going to be lots of fun for people to watch.
Hey, so what have you been monitoring? Maybe out of the corner of your eye, euphemistically, the Chiefs' changes. Looks like they're about to overhaul their defense, uh, and they've made a couple of trades. Actually, one major trade over the past 24 hours. But my question is, with respect to Jacksonville's success and near victory against the Patriots and that super fast defense, are we seeing because of that, even though Jacksonville didn't win the AFC championship and Philadelphia had a similarly structured defense, that teams are looking at that and we're going to see a lot of organizations restructure their defenses, and it's going to make perhaps, and it's obviously is that what the Chiefs are trying to do by your estimation?
Well, that's one goal. But what you need to know is that football adopted a concept of parity.
Mm-hmm.
And so as not to have the same franchises dominate over and over again, but they would get new and fresh teams into the mix. So the draft is structured in a way where a team like the Philadelphia Eagles now drafts 32nd in the first round. The second factor, though, is the salary cap, and that really has changed football. So you have a limit to how many great players, or more to the point, big cap numbers can go against that cap and still fit everyone into the hole. So the reality is, for a great team, it forces them to make decisions they wouldn't otherwise make. I mean, Derek Johnson could probably have played there for more years, but they're looking at the ability to put superstar salaries in place. And then that means that the backups tend to be early in their career on lower contracts, playing for the minimum. And so you've got a whole set of things going. A winning team is going to have its own free agents valued and vaunted by other teams who want to touch that Super Bowl or playoff magic. So they can't compete really for some of those free agents. Their own players in a winning situation will all believe it was their unique combination that allowed the team to win, and they want new contracts. And then, you have incumbent veterans who are getting older and have huge cap numbers, and so teams will get rid of them. So if this had been 30 years ago football, a team wouldn't get rid of a player. They would just keep him for the next year if he was at all productive. But now, if that salary and cap charge is seen as unmanageable, they just cut the player. And there is, under the collective bargaining agreement, a wrinkle that allows a veteran player who's been in the league for a long time to get a salary, and the team doesn't have to pay the whole cap charge for it if the player's a veteran and he's playing for the minimum. But and so that's a little bit helpful. But you see, this whole system is put in place to stop the New England Patriots from doing what they do every year. Why doesn't it happen? Because at the end of the day, winning in sports is about the quality of the organization, the owner, long-term stability,
Mm-hmm.
having a front office that understands you can utilize multiple different approaches and still win in football, but you got to have one. And you have to execute it and be consistent with it, and keep your coaching staff intact, and keep your core intact, and all the rest of it. So you take a team like the Philadelphia Eagles. I just wrote an article for Forbes on can they return.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they've done an excellent job of keeping the core of their players together. And the cap now allows a rookie to be controlled for 5 years on his rookie contract. So, you get a player like Carson Wentz, he doesn't have a huge cap charge, just he's on the first contract. And eventually, every quarterback who signs now, whether it's Garoppolo at the 49ers and Next up will be this pure free agent we haven't seen since Warren Moon, and that's Kirk Cousins, will come on the market.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to sign the biggest contract ever. He's at his prime. It's a quarterback short league where so many teams are looking, and he's got free bidding. So it's not a matter of him trying to compare himself to other quarterback. It's just, if not him, who? And then the dollars will grow exponentially. So every time you see a new quarterback signing in a quarterback-centric league, that will be a record-breaking contract.
I have to ask you, because out here in Atlanta, the talk is with Matt Ryan and Mr. Blank, Arthur Blank, the owner of the Atlanta Falcons, has put out a sort of media crumb where he says, I don't want to give up away the store. I want Matt to be a Falcon. But the talk is that given Jimmy Garoppolo's right now leading contract, it looks like we had Derek Carr last year who set the record, and then we had Matt Stafford who topped him just a few weeks later. And then, it's insane, right? But
this position is so critical that you rarely ever see a quarterback that is valuable in free agency. And you rarely ever see a whole lot of dissonance in the contract negotiation process. It's just announced. In other words, the quarterback is continually extended. With Matt Ryan, they have a Super Bowl type of quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Reliable, dependable, very talented, and so you have to hang on to him. Now, there are players. The premium example is Tom Brady,
mm-hmm.
who's probably taking half of what he otherwise could get, because nobody has better vested interest in the team winning and getting the Super Bowl than the quarterback. He's the most visible figure. He's the one that's going to get all the endorsements. He's the one whose life will change. He's the one most likely to be picked MVP. And his branding process will come out of that. I went through that for 3 years with Troy Aikman, for a year with Steve Young, for a year with Ben Roethlisberger. You've got a game watched by 110, 115 million people. So there are times where a quarterback will take a discount to open up cap room. But all I will tell you is that scarcity continues to be there. And Atlanta's lucky because it's got one of the 10 best quarterbacks in football. And if not Matt Ryan, who and when?
Hey, I'm curious, who jumps first, Kirk Cousins or Matt Ryan? In other words, because you see what I'm getting at, right? Who
he hasn't started yet.
Mm-hmm.
So remember, it's going to be several more weeks till it gets going. But I guarantee you there have been discussions already occurring, and we've never seen a situation where someone at the right age who's had experience with piloting a team, who's considered to be valuable, is out on the market. In 1984, the reason I was able to get Warren Moon the best contract in the history of football as he returned from a career in Canada to the NFL was you give up nothing for him. All you have to do is sign him. You don't have to trade for him. You don't have to give up draft picks. You simply sign him. And so that's where, if you look at it, you have two situations. You have teams that right now need a starting quarterback. Someone could argue that would be Cleveland, Buffalo, the New York Jets. Then you have a whole series of aging quarterbacks where other teams are looking to do what Kansas City did with Mahomes, which is not have a gap between quality quarterbacking and then the next person who's going to take over. And those would be the New York Giants, the San Diego Chargers, the New Orleans Saints. The Arizona Cardinals actually need one right now, but they also be in that category because Eli Manning and Drew Brees and Philip Rivers and Pittsburgh and Ben Roethlisberger, those quarterbacks still can play, some of them at the top. But if you don't have as a team that backup or reserve ready to go and with some seasoning, it can be horrific. Look at teams like the Cleveland Browns that have looked forever to find the right starting quarterback. This search can go on forever.
Hey, speaking of quarterbacks, I want to focus more now on your two quarterback clients, Chase Liddon and Nick Simonek. And start with Chase first from Marshall. What are his attributes?
So he's big, he's strong, he's got a gun for an arm, he's accurate, he's a good leader, and he sort of fits classic franchise quarterback situation. But he's not at this. Do have prognosticators preordained who will be, the top picks. And in half the cases they're right, but in half the cases it's just their opinion, and they're not teams. So there's been a prognostication already that has the big six quarterbacks, and those would be Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Mason Rudolph from Oklahoma State, Lamar Jackson, and Baker Mayfield. But we faced this situation a year ago where it was there were three top quarterbacks: Deshaun Kaiser and Watson, and the quarterback that Chicago took,
Mitch Trubisky, who they basically traded their draft for him.
Right.
Yeah.
So the point is, but somehow Patrick was the second quarterback drafted. So Chase Liddon, big, strong, he's going to be a monster in the league as time develops. Nick Simonek only has the detriment. He's got the same thing that every spread quarterback has to deal with. So 60% of the college offenses are what are called spread, or in the case of Texas Tech, air raid. And the ball is not taken under center. The player stands back in what we used to call a shotgun. And so there's always great doubt in this player. Make the adjustment. Can he get under center? Can he do the footwork and the rest of it? Well, Marcus Mariota played in that offense. Jared Goff played in that offense. Patrick Mahomes played in that offense. So he's got that to overcome. And but what he offers is really super, because he was hyper productive, big, strong, can move around. Again, another person who could catch fire in all of this. Logan Woodside up at Toledo just put together, especially his junior year, stats that are basically unbelievable. And so he is also rising. And then we have the quarterback Riley Ferguson from the University of Memphis, and again, strong, tall, can throw the ball, was immensely prolific this year. So I think all of them are going to make an impact sometime. It just depends on which team likes who and how fast the quarterbacks run.
And then you have North Texas running back Jeffrey Wilson,
who set all sorts of records up there and is fast back. So we have the same two backs system that we had last year with Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones, and that's with Ronald Jones and Jeffrey Wilson. And if Ronald Jones runs a fast 40, I see him as a first rounder. If Jeffrey can be productive at the combine, he's going to rise quickly too. So this is a situation where, notwithstanding what happened during the season, because it's a projection, players are able to rise. So they need the highest quality training, Most of them start around January 1st and they go all the way up until the combine. And they're given heightened nutrition. They're worked in terms of strength and speed. And you'd be amazed at what 7 weeks can do with a committed athlete. It would shock you how much faster they get and how much higher they can leap because they've been injured during the season. A lot of them are, even if they're not, they're still worn down.
And the Oakland Raiders are on the hunt for a linebacker, it would seem, and it looks like you have a client in Alvin Jones that might fill the bill. You want to talk about him?
Alvin Jones is a very active linebacker. He moves very nicely. He's got great lineage and all the rest of it. And we're getting great reports for him from the training he's doing. A number of our clients are training at a place called Exos, which is in Carlsbad, which for people who don't live in the area is North County of San Diego. And again, there are a number of people who do a good job at it, but they do a particularly good job, and the results show it.
Hey, now, shifting gears, I want to talk about something that you followed for a long time, and that's brain injuries in football. And you had part of your 31st annual Leigh Steinberg Super Bowl party focused on that very subject in CTE. And yeah, talk about that event first of all, and where are we now in the resolution of this gigantic problem?
So as we've talked about before, Zenny, I had a crisis of conscience back in the 80s. I was watching quarterbacks and other players get hit in the head. Intuitively, something had to be wrong with that, and yet the brain's the last frontier of medical science. We go to doctors, they couldn't tell us how many or too many. So we held a player safety concussion conference here in 1994, and players like Steve Young and Warren Moon and Troy Aikman and Drew Bledsoe and Rob Johnson and others were at least able to listen to what the experts were telling them, but it wasn't totally sophisticated. So, and we made suggestions in a white paper for changes in blocking and tackling rules, and neurologists on the sidelines, a standardized regimen, a universal use of the baseline testing as a marker to where an athlete is in training camp. And then when he suffers a hit, you can measure the difference in mental acuity, memory, and productivity. So as years have gone on, we've done more and more of the conferences. One of our biggest was in about 2005, where we had Ben and Amalu, whose life was featured in the concussion movie, played by Will Smith. Mm-hmm. And they reported 3 or more causes an exponentially higher rate of Alzheimer's, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, dementia, depression. So I've called it a ticking time bomb and an undiagnosed health epidemic. Mm-hmm. So where we are today, and Dr. Nicole Fisher led for the last 3 years a series of brain health summits that we've done prior to the Super Bowl party. Where we are now is the coaching that's needed for blocking and tackling in the sport of football is starting to get better. So the best way to stop players from relying on hits that are going to cause major damage is you coach them early. The second thing we focused on is how old should a young person be before they even play tackle football, because the effects on teenage or younger brain are devastating. And then we're finally starting to see some competition because of the profit margin, because of putting American ingenuity and engineering in, some new designs for helmets. The current helmet mostly protects against skull fracture. So the question is, how can you stop that energy coming in through the plastic and the liner from rattling the brain around? And they have new coil and compression formulas that will dissipate or displace the energy flow. And then there are better methods of diagnosis on the sideline, so you absolutely don't miss and you don't get caught up in second concussion syndrome, which is the first one happens, it takes that to do it. It's not diagnosed correctly, and the player goes back out too early to play, and then the second one creates a perfect neurological storm. So there's that. There's now a vaccine, a test for people who are living that already have CT because the damage is coming earlier. Look, here's the problem. This is not simply a issue for pro football. It's college football, it's high school football, it's hockey, it's field hockey, it's young girls who play AYSO soccer who are getting concussions because of the thinness of their neck. If every time an offensive lineman hits a defensive lineman at the inception of a football play, it produces a low-level sub-concussive event, a little bit of change. So you could have an offensive lineman walk out of football with 10,000 sub-concussive events, none of which have been diagnosed, none of which the player's aware of, but the aggregate almost certainly does the same brain damage as getting hit 4 or 5 times. So let's say 50% of the moms in the country start to understand these facts and tell their teenage boys, you can play any sport but not tackle football. It won't kill football. It will change, however, the socioeconomics of it. So the only people you might see as time rolls on playing football are the same ones who box or do UFC, where almost certainly they're going to experience problems later. Mm-hmm. So that's the human issue is the first motivation, but even from the standpoint of preserving a sport like football, we have to continue moving.
How was the event? You handed out some awards, I noticed.
At the Super Bowl party.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We hand out humanitarian awards. Mm-hmm. There's so much focus on the misbehavior of athletes in general, and especially in the NFL. What people don't see and realize is that you have owners, executives, coaches, players, and retired players all doing charitable and community philanthropic work. So we decided to put the focus on it. Last year, the owner award went to Clark Hunt of the Chiefs. Rick Smith of the Texans got the executive. Bruce Arians of the Cardinals was the coach. Stephen Smith Sr. was the player, and the retired players were Warren Moon and Earl Campbell. This year, we gave the executive award to Rick Spielman of the Minnesota Vikings, to Andy Reid, the coach. Brian Leaf, as a retired player, to sort of note the way he's turned his life around from, being considered the biggest bust in the history of football and ending up in prison to now being out there running recovery centers and inspiring people across the country. And then Eric Dickerson got one for his work with fatherless boys and in a fabulous program.
Hey, great to see Ryan Leaf back. Great to see Ryan Leaf come back. That's really heartwarming. He's
we had an event called the Silver Bowl on Sunday, and it was like 7 or 8 hours for a party that had heavy music, and then I co-hosted it. It broke a couple times. Once I interviewed the former Minnesota Viking Carl Eller, who talked about struggle. And then we broke another time and interviewed Ryan Leach. And he was really inspiring, and the crowd gave him a standing ovation. So the whole point about modeling that is, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and the whole reason about modeling that, the reason I've been public about my own situation is if someone's out there and they're confused, depressed, hopeless, to just show them that there's light at the end of the tunnel and there is a path back.
Right.
And so people say, well, why would you be public about it? Well, what lifetime would I be waiting for to try to help someone else with the example of, where I was 8 years ago and where I am now? I should tell you, the Super Bowl party also had a live hookup between troops in the field in Afghanistan. They were Green Berets in Afghanistan, and they got to hook in and talk to some of the players and luminaries.
Hey, I have to ask you in light, and I have to mention this because it's difficult to watch television over the past 24 hours. With the shooting that happened, what can the NFL community do? Because I don't know that, when I say we, I mean media, agents, players. What can we do to help? I mean, what can we contribute?
Well, look, as you know, the problem is that we in California see guns in entirely different ways they do in major parts of the country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to us, a gun is associated with crime. It's a lifestyle for people in other areas. They grow up target shooting and hunting and all the rest of it. The reality is I've stopped watching the coverage of tragedy after tragedy. And the reason is this. It's not that I don't feel empathy
mm-hmm.
for the victims.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Because I do.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is we go through this cycle over and over and over again. We come to the end of it. Congress or state legislatures will never vote to stop, multiple shot assault type weapons from being distributed, and they won't vote for mental health funding that
right.
could probably spot easier some of the people who are most involved. Athletes can always be role models on every issue, and as you know, our whole practice is about role modeling athletes making a difference.
Right, which is why I ask. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I guess the point there is that it's like my point of view towards the demonstrations we had last year.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine for people to protest and all the rest of it, but you don't continue protesting forever. I mean, we're all Berkeleyans. The goal is not. The goal
Go Bears!
The goal is to get some actual change going. So the more quickly the athletes could have gotten away from the whole issue of the flag and gotten to what can the NFL do in the inner city for job retraining, for Head Start education, for better relations with the police, to just tackle the root causes, because football's got all the profile and all the money needed, and players could be doing that in different places. So I guess my point with all of this is art, and the reason I don't want the shooting after shooting is it fills us with anger and rage. There's nothing to be done about it. The National Rifle Association is the most powerful law in terms of controlling every many members of Congress, and it just doesn't seem like it's going to change. And the other focus is in mental health and controls that make sure that people with bad mental health, A, get treated, and B, don't end up with the ability to have a rifle that can shoot that many rounds so quickly.
Hey, so I know that Jay's said an hour, but so I just want to be mindful of the time. But I have to ask you, people watching this, I have a number of friends who, like Rick Saratel and others, and they are out scouting people and looking for, the next player. But if someone wants to get a potential client to you to represent, how do they do that?
Well, by going to Steinberg Sports or Facebook or reaching me Leigh at SteinbergSports.com or Twitter, or one of the multiple chains. We have a website. I thought you were going to ask me how someone gets involved in a career in professional sports.
Oh.
And, we've actually got some really interesting programs. I'm trying to create a new generation of sports professionals with ethics and values, specifically trained, because you go to law school or business school or even sports management, and what they emphasize is the principles of that field. Walk out of law school, and unless you've had a summer job, you have no more idea about how to do anything, start a practice, file a brief, go to court, do anything. They don't teach that. So we first of all have held agent academies, and we have two of them upcoming. One will be in Los Angeles, and the other will be in Dallas, Texas. We've done, I think, 15 of them that will train someone, people skills, listening, how to recruit, how to negotiate, how to brand, how to market, how to do charitable programs. We also are having another sports career conference, summit, which we did last fall. And that was in every area. There were people who were front office from colleges, in athletic departments, and from individual teams. There were people that spoke on the issue of marketing and branding and public relations and training of athletes and sports movies and television. It was really fabulous. But the best thing we have coming is a very unique education course. It's got like 85 modules, but 10 different subjects. And so if you take this online, you're hearing from experts in every field about how to break into sports television, how to break into marketing, how to set up a charitable foundation in an athletic context, how to get a job as an agent, how to get a job running a facility or management, running the LA Coliseum, or running how to get a job with an athletic department or with a league. So we have experts in all that field. In a couple of weeks, it will go online, and it's my answer to the 15,000 people who send resumes every year, which is that let's pass this knowledge down and help mentor and create a new generation that can bring their own vision to the world of sports.
Hey, I have to ask you, I don't know if you saw the movie I, Tonya or not, but it's one of my favorites. And I ask it for this reason. One of your clients, Katarina Witt, was mentioned briefly in that movie. And my question is, at what point is your job made easier if you have a Katarina Witt where you don't have what Tonya Harding had, which was this entourage of people that were, shall we say, a little bit unusual in their character,
So actually, I had Brian Boitano. The reason we're associated with Katarina Witt is when Brian and Katarina came back from the 1980 Olympics, Winter Olympics, we put together a skate show that both of them owned. But the answer is clear. Prevention is the best way to deal with this. You now have course campuses for athletes, teaching them how to avoid problems with alcohol, avoid problems with the opposite sex, how to conduct themselves in public, which are really helpful. And then we do the same things with our clients. So it's understanding the power of the internet, understanding the power and scope comment can make. It's understanding that if you leave your home as an athlete, collegiately in many cases, and certainly professionally, there's a big microscope on. The ubiquitous nature of the cell phone and its camera means that an athlete is like what we used to call candid camera all the time. And so they need to adopt specific techniques to deal with them. So part of it's the responsibility of the agents. The colleges are doing education, and then the players' associations are doing education, and then the leagues themselves are doing that type of thing. So for someone to fall through the cracks and have an ugly incident, they've got to have completely ignored all the teaching and coaching on this subject that we got from their parents, from college, from their agent, from the Players Association, and from the league. That's why I've always said there's no reason any athlete should have financial problems at the end of their career. They're a totally privileged group. They have all the skill set they need to be successful in business. And they have the ability to pick very talented financial planners and other people to be around.
Yeah, we've talked. I want to also get your opinion on this. We talked a lot about, not you and I, but the common refrain has been, oh, the NFL is on decline, the ratings are down, yada, yada, yada. And yet, Super Bowl 52, if you take the viewership from the fourth quarter, had 112.4 million viewers, making it the second most watched television program in history. Are we...
So here's the thing.
You know what I'm saying?
What they do is there are trends that are larger than any sport occurring in television.
Mm-hmm.
You have a millennial generation cutting the cord and decoupling. So instead of getting a cable network, what they're doing is, my son John is at 31, uses his phone in the morning and he gets Hulu or Amazon or Netflix, and that's his primary source. So there's a generalized drop in the hot ratings for more traditional TV. Mm-hmm. It's just happening.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing to say. The second is, how many sports are going to not have some sort of PR damage when the President of the United States singles them out, goals to players of fees and all of the rest of it. So that was a heavy deal. But just to put this in perspective, mm-hmm. in the history of American sports, there's never been a time where 3 of the top 5 Nielsen-rated nighttime during the week shows have been a sport. And this happens week after week after week, where 3 of the top 5, 2 of the top 5, 4 of the top 10, 5 of the top 10 of all forms of entertainment. So it's 2.5 Men and Blackish and NCIS and Dancing with Stars and everything are outrated by NFL football. So the question is, compared to what? We've never seen our culture have a love affair with the sport like they right now have with football.
Which continues.
So it's down 10 or 11%, from what? From the most amazing dominance that you've ever seen. Look, for the long term, concussion's an existential threat to football. That's why if you love football, we have to deal with it.
Right.
And people can deal with it if enough energy and creative engineering is done. There are ways to make the game safer, not safe, but safer. Second thing is that that the protests turned a number of people off who mm-hmm. simply looked at the flag and thought these people are out. And the reality is this was their coming to consciousness, mm-hmm. saying what you and I did back at Berkeley, and being able to express a larger view. But it needed to be converted into practical action, because the goal of a protest is to bring attention to some area that needs rectifying. It's not to have protests go on and on and on. So the NFL is still the straw that stirs the drink in this country. When you compare the numbers, they eclipse anything else.
Hey, and I want to talk about, before we close too, Sebastian Janikowski served 18 years with the Oakland Raiders. And Seabass was cut. Shocking to me, a number of Raider fans. But he was under contract, and therefore his compensation didn't show up on the now popular salary cap posts everywhere. So how are we to properly evaluate what a team really has to spend? How do you do it? Does that hamper your ability to figure out, where your clients fit, or do you get a
No,
different, information set of?
we get numbers on it, and it's not a big hidden secret.
Mm-hmm.
So you could simply ask someone you know on a team, and they'll tell you because it fluctuates depending on the time of year that it is. So, like right now, the Philadelphia Eagles are over the cap. At a certain point, the team can't sit that way, but you can figure it out with Sebastian Janikowski. What a wonderful career. I mean, he's was state of the art for so long, but you get to a point, as I said with you before, where a veteran player's salary starts to constitute a significant hit against the salary cap. And for Janikowski did something virtually no kicker's ever done. He got drafted and spent the next roughly 20 years with the same team. Kickers tend to bounce around a whole lot, and they get cut, and then they start somewhere else, and they get cut. So he's had the benefit of all that, and you see those sorts of situations around the league a lot because if the player's value to the team drops below what they can replace him with for a much cheaper cap hit, they're going to do it.
Wow.
But we are seeing more guaranteed contracts now, especially with rookies, than we ever did before.
More front-loaded ones, basically? Remember Joey Bosa? Or
not necessarily. The way that the rookie salary cap works is that if Sam Bradford got $40 million to sign in 2010, then the salary cap goes into effect. So this guys at the top of the first round the last couple of years have gotten $22 million. So you're not going to cry for them. They're still handsomely compensated, but that bonus is about half what it was before, and that money theoretically is redistributed to other people. But here's what's changed. For years I talked to you about the fact that the specific salary years in a contract for football, unlike baseball and basketball, were not guaranteed. And that meant that the bonus was the only guaranteed money a player would ever see. So those people say, well, why should an athlete be able to renegotiate his contract? Well, there's a heavy argument against it if he has a guaranteed contract because the teams don't know. So this is for skill, meaning that they can cut him because they don't like his talent level, and injury, meaning he suffered a career-ending injury. This year, for the first time, the top 22 draft picks in the first round got totally guaranteed contracts for 4 years for skill and injury. Just has not happened before. Then as you went down that round, if it was a 4-year contract, it was guaranteed for 3 + 1, 3 years. And even in the second round, there were guarantees for, say, 2 out of the 4 years. So that's a major advance.
Well, Leigh, it's been an hour, and I could talk to you for several hours. But I want to thank you very much for your valuable time spent here, and the wisdom that you impart is always not just fascinating, but also game changing with respect to the sport. I think. And by the way, and I think it's. And I want to say congratulations again on your resurgence, but also your way of doing it is, in terms of role models, now needed now more than ever. And it's also great to hear not just athletes, but Greg Popovich talking about Black History Month a couple of days ago. I mean, we're in a heady time. You know.
So let's take that just briefly on
Yeah,
that
sure.
subject.
Yeah.
I don't mean to single out a generation,
Mm-hmm.
but for most of us growing up in this country who are over 40,
Like me.
we studied the history that preceded us.
Right.
So free agency exists because Kurt Flood was courageous and was willing to sit out a ruin in his career rather than being treated without options. If you ask a younger baseball player who Kurt Flood is, they can't tell you.
Yeah.
Jackie Robinson, because they do a day every year, they can't. But there are pioneers. We all stand on the shoulders of people who came before us. And, Black history is something people need to understand. I just finished the book by Ta-Nehisi Coates called something like We Had It for 8 Years. And he gives the history of Black experience in this country that makes it clear that the oppression didn't end with the end of slavery.
Right.
That it just kept going, that Blacks were terrorized and taken off land, from 1865 on. And then they missed out on the New Deal because most of the benefits were carefully structured, so they didn't go to Blacks. And then he missed out on home ownership because all the federal mortgage programs and everything were slammed. So this has gone on. But that's a valuable thing to understand. It wasn't just slavery ends and now, Black people are co-equal. It continued getting held down for years and years to come. So, and athletes who serve as role models are people that well need to know those lessons.
Wow. That is a heck of a point to end on. But hey, Leigh, stick around off camera. And but I want to thank you on camera for another fantastic exchange and interview. Thank you.
You know what? I'm going to show you what I see from my side of things.
Oh, okay. Wow, look at that view. Look at that view. That's incredible. Leigh, I got to come by your office and do an interview one day. I got to fly down to Newport.
Yes,
that's going to be my next. The next one we're going to do from your office. How's that? We'll do live from your office. That'll be the next time. That'll be the next one.
Happy to visit with you.
Okay, hold on.
Okay.
All right, I'll be right back. Hold a second. All right, thanks.